this is Bruno from RVing TV, and today I thought we'd do something a little bit different. We're going to show you today how to bake some homemade bread. The reason for this is, if you're trying to live a really good, clean lifestyle, for myself, I was trying to find some really good bread in the local area, and I started to notice a trend that several stores are actually bringing in baked bread, but it's actually frozen, and then they're putting it out on the shelves and it's defrosting. So you're not really getting fresh bread. So in the hunt to get a cleaner, fresher bread with less preservatives in it, I started looking for some recipes, and we found a great recipe to make some Italian loaves. So today we're going to take a look at doing that. Now this recipe is so simple that you can bake it from home, or if you're traveling in your RV, you can actually do it while you're out on the road. Today we're going to try for the first time using our KitchenAid mixer to mix up the dough itself. Typically I've done this by hand, so it's a very easy recipe, so you don't have to have all the appliances with you. Now this recipe we did find on the internet from Gather for Bread, so I'd like to thank them for their recipe. It's a great simple recipe. We've laid out all of our ingredients, and what you're basically going to need is about 5.5 to 6 cups of flour. That can be bread or all-purpose flour. You're going to need a teaspoon of salt, teaspoon of sugar. You're going to need a teaspoon of active dry yeast, some olive oil, some warm water to get started. And we've laid that out right now so that we're prepped and ready to go. So first thing that you're going to want to do is take 2 cups of hot water. Now the water should be no more than about 110 degrees. And yes, I'm doing this typical guy style with our digital thermometer rather than a regular thermometer. Got to make it a little bit interesting. So we're going to take our water, pour it into our bowl. Now what we're going to want to do is take our dry active yeast. We're going to want to take a teaspoon of that, a tablespoon of our dry active yeast. So we've got it measured out. Place it into our water. What I like to do is mix our sugar and our salt together. Now you're going to need to let this sit and allow the yeast to activate. So what I do is I like to give it a little bit of a stir. We're going to let it sit. It's going to take approximately 5-10 minutes. And when it starts bubbling a little bit and you can see it's really mixed up well, then you know that it's ready to go. So we'll come back in a few minutes and we'll continue from there. Okay, so we've given our active dry yeast enough time to dissolve and start activating. It's in our bowl. What we want to do now is we actually want to start adding flour to it, about a cup at a time, until it's really mixed into a nice consistency, and we'll stop adding flour when we get to the point where our dough will start pulling itself away from the edge of our bowl. So we're going to take this and we will take a cup at a time. Now I like to prep my flour. I've put 6 cups of flour because we're going to need some flour to actually sprinkle when we're going to knead our dough. And we'll want to set our machine to nothing faster than speed number 2. And all we're going to do is just slowly start adding our flour in so that we start getting a really nice consistency. Now you can also do this by hand, which is typically the way that I've done it in the past, but we thought we'd try something new today. Okay, so As the dough pulls itself away, you'll notice from the moisture in the actual dough how much flour you'll be needing to keep adding to it. As it pulls itself away and it's looking like it's pretty much one full large consistent piece, you'll be able then to take that dough out, and what we're going to do is start kneading it. We're getting very close to that right now, so what I like to do is flour our workspace so that way we won't have our dough sticking to our board. And I think we're just about there. So we'll actually stop our machine here. We'll take down our dough hook. Now this can sometimes get a little bit messy on your fingers. Don't worry about that. That's part of the fun. So we're going to actually take this and put that right here. I like to, we'll give this a couple of quick turns, pick up a little bit of that last flour. And what we'll do is we'll set our bowl aside for now. Now what you'll want to do is actually knead your dough. So I like to give it a little bit of a push. Turn it over 90 or turn it 90 degrees, continue to give it a bit of a push. I like to actually fold it over, continue to turn it 90 degrees, fold it back over, give it a bit of a push here. You can see I just like to push forward with the palm of my hands. And we're going to do that several times. And then what we will do is you're going to want to do this for 3 to 5 minutes or so. You'll kind of see the consistency of the dough. Make sure that your workspace stays floured so it's not actually sticking. Knead it out the way, if you were making homemade pizza, that you would typically do it. You'll notice I keep rotating it 90 degrees. Then what we're going to be doing next is we're going to take some olive oil, put it into our bowl, and then we're going to let the dough rise. So you're going to notice our consistency of our dough is very, very consistent now. Let's turn it over. Now, if you notice, what I'm actually doing is bringing it more and more to a ball at this point, so that we put it back in our bowl and we'll let it rise. Now, for the sake of the video, you'll see that we'll be blending some shots, just so that this doesn't become a super long video where you're watching every tiny little step, because it's a very easy process itself. So some little things that you won't see in our video, for example, our pot, or our bowl I should say, when we're getting ready for this step, that you won't see on the video what I've actually done. There's always a little bit of flour residue on the side. I'm not a big fan of that, so in between, what I've actually done is just washed out that bowl. I like it to be super, super, super clean. So you're gonna notice our dough here is very consistent, really nice. So I like to bring it into a nice little ball. We're gonna take our bowl here. I'm using some extra virgin olive oil. We're going to put a few drops in there. Now you have a couple of options. You can take a small paper towel, roll it around. I like to just shake it around a little bit. And then we're going to put our dough in here. And what you're going to want to do is actually make sure the dough gets coated on all sides. And the reason for that is it's going to help keep the moisture in the dough from drying out while it's rising. Then what we're going to do, I'm just going to step to the side here because I've already taken a pre-moist towel. We're going to take this, we're actually going to cover it up. You now want to take your bowl with your dough, set it aside in a dry, warm place. Usually one of the best spots for that is actually right in your oven, and that way it's dry, warm, and off to the side. Then you're going to want to leave this for about 1 to 2 hours. Let the dough rise until it's basically double in size. Then at that point we'll come back and we'll actually show you the next steps into making our fresh bread. Alright, so it's been about 2 hours. Our dough should be finished rising, so we're going to take it out of the oven here. Of course the oven is off. It was just being used as a nice warm place. So we'll take our covering off. You're going to notice the size difference. So let's just turn that over, and it's risen really nicely. We'll put our bowl off to the side. And then what we're going to want to do now is we're going to want to make sure our work surface here has been properly floured. You're basically just going to want to knead it to get the air out of it. You're going to want to work it for a few minutes. Again, just work it, get the air out. Then ideally what we want to do is we want to leave it and let the dough rest for another 5-10 minutes approximately. Some people like to leave it upwards of 20 minutes, but that might be, in my opinion, a little bit of overkill. We've got our knife here. And after we've worked it a little bit, what we really want to do is we want to take it, cut it in half. We're going to set half aside. Again, with our working area, let's just make sure we've got a good floured area. And then what we really want to do is just work it into the shape that we feel we're going to want for our bread. So if you wanted to have it more of an Italian style, you could work it into a nice round ball. Or if you want the longer loaf, you can actually work it a little bit longer. So once we've done that, we're going to set that one aside. Sorry, I'm a little picky at times at the way it looks. We'll set that aside. We're going to do the same with our second piece. It's actually quite fun. Just make sure you keep your work surface properly floured. And I don't quite like the look of this piece, so we're going to work it just a little bit more to get it into the shape that we think will work best for us. There we go. Now what we're going to do is we're going to let it sit for that 5-10 minutes. At this time, this is where we're going to want to start boiling some water. We're going to need some boiled water because what we're going to do is you're going to take a roasting pan or a baking pan. We're going to fill this with boiling water, place it at the base of our oven. The reasoning for that is that water and that moisture is going to help give us a really nice crust on our breads. So we're going to leave you for a few minutes now while we let the dough rest and while we boil the water. We're also going to prep a couple of other items which we'll show you, and we'll come back and we'll finish up those few steps so you can see it go into the oven. So we'll be back in a bit. All right, so on to our next steps. So what we are going to do, we have our pan that we want to place our boiling water. Our water has finished boiling here. Now just be extra cautious with this. What you want to do is you want to have about an inch or so of water in the pan. There we go. We'll set that aside, and we actually want to place this right at the base of the oven. So we'll put that in so it's ready to go. There we go. And then you have a couple of options at this point. You can use cookie sheets. I actually like to use baking stones. So we have a couple of pizza stones. These were actually purchased a little while ago from Walmart. What's really nice about these, they're about $15 a piece, which is really reasonable. They can be used in the oven, used in the barbecue. I've typically used them for homemade pizza, but I also like to use them for the bread. I find you just get a little nicer crust on the bottom. So what you will want to do is, we've prepped cold water because that's going to be one of our next steps. But before we get to that, you're going to want to take some flour, or if you have some cornmeal, you actually want to sprinkle that out onto the pizza stone. Make sure it's nicely distributed on there. That's just going to help keep our bread from sticking to the pizza stone while it's cooking. And then what we're going to want to do is, we've left our bread to rest for a while. We're going to want to put that there. We are going to want to take a really sharp knife. Now it's up to you the angles that you want to cut, but typically you want to take 3 cuts into the bread, about 1/8 to 1/4 inch deep. That's going to help with the crust and a little bit of the expansion of the bread. Then what we're going to want to do, take a barbecue brush. You can also use a spritzer bottle filled with cold water, but we're going to want to take that and brush the top of our bread with the water. And what that's going to help do is keep the bread from drying up, but it's also going to help our crust and give us a really nice crust on our bread. So now that we've done the one, we'll take this, place it into the oven. Now our oven is cold right at the moment. We're going to do our second stone here. We'll move the water out of the way so you can see that a little bit better. And this cornmeal is nice. It'll also stick a little bit to the bottom of the bread and just give you that nice little finish to the bottom as it's crusting up. So we've got a nice little distribution there. We're going to take our final loaf, bring it over here, and we're going to do the same thing. We'll make a couple of little cuts. Take our water, give it a really good coating. What's nice about this recipe is, in between the different steps, You can actually go off, do some things around the house if you have some errands to run. You know, the 2 hours, I like to give the bread 2 hours to rise, or the dough I should say, 2 hours to rise. So you can actually go out, do some yard work, go run some errands that you need to do. Gives you a little bit of flexibility. So now that we've brushed that, now when you use these pizza stones in an oven, you're going to see they're not going to sit flat. You are going to have to overlap one stone a little bit on the other. Not really going to do anything because it's the heat being dispersed. Now what we're going to want to do is now set our oven to bake at 400 degrees. We're going to start that and we're going to set our timer. I like to set it for about 35 minutes. It's actually going to take you, depending on your oven, 35 to 40 minutes to bake the 2 loaves of bread. I like to set it at about 35 minutes. That way I'll get that reminder, I can come take a look at it, and I can decide, do I need 10 minutes more, or am I going to set it in 2-3 minute intervals, 5 minute intervals, so that I don't burn the bread or overcook it. I can get it to the crispness that I like for my crust. So if you like a really dark crust, you'll cook it a little bit longer. If you want it a little bit lighter and a little more golden, you know, probably 35-36 minutes will do. But you'll be able to monitor it from there. So we're going to let that cook now for about 35-40 minutes, and then we will show you what the finished product looks like. All right, our timer on our oven has just gone off. So to take the bread out of the oven, I like to actually use a pizza peel. There are several different styles that you can use, but this will allow me to reach in, grab the bread, pull it off of the stone. And if we've done this right, this should slide right underneath our bread. Our cornmeal should have kept it from sticking to our stone. So you have to make sure you put enough of that cornmeal down, or if you're using flour, enough flour to keep it from sticking. Let's take a look at how the bread turned out. So there's loaf number 1. And loaf number 2. What's really nice, we'll put our peel off to the side here. What's really nice, if you gave it a little gentle tap, you'll notice the crust is nice and hard on it. And then ideally what you want to do now is you would let the bread sit, cool down, but just to give you a little idea, it's a little bit hot. We're going to cut into it and really give you a nice little shot there of the bread, fully cooked inside. And absolutely delicious. So I hope you've enjoyed this video on how to bake fresh bread. We'll post the recipe down below the video and the steps that you can follow. Very simple, very straightforward. I've actually only made this recipe once before and made a couple of minor modifications just for my personal liking with the cornmeal, etc. So I hope that you'll be able to use this and you can bake it either in home or in your RV with a convection oven or a regular oven. Well, this is Bruno from RVing TV saying thank you for viewing our video. If you like the video, please click the like button and feel free to subscribe to our channel, and you'll be notified as new videos are posted, both on great recipes and lifestyle products as well as test drives and RVing features. Hopefully you'll enjoy the bread, and I wish you a prosperous and happy lifestyle.